The TARDIS, the Doctor's home and mode of transport through time and space, has been a part of Doctor Who since day one. Its unique qualities, from being bigger on the inside to its iconic design, makes it a fundamental part of the show's identity. Beyond simply taking the Doctor and his companions to different planets and time periods, the TARDIS often serves as a key setting in its own right. The console room and its many unseen corridors have played vital roles in shaping the stories we love. In short, the TARDIS is as essential to Doctor Who as the Doctor himself. Yet, despite its importance, there have been times when the TARDIS has disappeared, sometimes playing no role in the story at all. But why? And what led to these unusual absences? Let's take a look at the disappearing TARDIS and uncover the reasons behind its vanishing act. Despite all the dangers the Doctor has faced over the years, the TARDIS has often served as a safe haven, impenetrable to outside forces and, in theory, protected by the concept of temporal grace, preventing weapons from working inside it, although this rule has been inconsistently applied. In the 1960s, it was implied that the Doctor had little or no control over where the TARDIS would take him. While this lack of direction could be unsettling, it suited the Doctor's love for exploration and reinforced his status as a fugitive from the Time Lords. Fittingly, when the Time Lords finally caught up with the Doctor in the War Games, they weaponized the TARDIS against him, using it as a tool to enforce their punishment. Stripping the Doctor of his knowledge of space-time travel, they disabled the TARDIS and exiled the newly regenerated Third Doctor to 20th century Earth. With the Doctor now bound to one time and place, the TARDIS became little more than a background fixture, a reminder of the life he once had. Though the Doctor made numerous attempts to repair it, even stealing components from the Master's TARDIS, he remained trapped under the Time Lord's imposed exile. At times the TARDIS wouldn't appear in the story at all, and when it did, it functioned mainly as a laboratory or undergoing repairs. While this earthbound format allowed for compelling storytelling as well as offering the production team budgetary advantages, it also became a creative constraint long term. Recognising this, the production team gradually reintroduced the TARDIS as a means of travel, initially under the Time Lord's supervision for special missions such as colony in space, and then later with limited autonomy. Finally, at the conclusion of the Three Doctors, the Time Lords lifted the Doctor's exile, restoring his knowledge of time travel, and returning the TARDIS to its rightful place at the heart of the series. Early into his exile, the Doctor exuded a frustration and at times sadness about the confines of his settings. The TARDIS acted as a symbol of his liberal freedom across time and space, and his reliance on this time machine to live out the life he chooses. Furthermore, the pain of his exile was further exasperated by the presence of the Master, introduced during the Third Doctor era, who, despite being a villain and a menace to Earth and the universe, still had the freedoms that the Doctor once more yearned for, given that he had a perfectly functioning TARDIS to travel around in. Yet, for the Doctor, the absence of the TARDIS eventually opened the door to appreciate new things in life, as the exile on Earth shaped his persona and long-term friendships with not just companions Liz and Joe, but also the Brigadier, who, despite never being a full-time passenger on the TARDIS, still developed an enduring friendship with the Doctor that lasted throughout their lives. Despite his desire and attempts to leave Earth, there was a reluctance to permanently do so once the Time Lords had lifted the exile, with the Doctor still remaining as Unit's scientific advisor for the rest of his incarnation. Sometimes the absence of the TARDIS, or its inability to function, becomes integral to the narrative. This idea was toyed with as early as the Mind Robber, when, at the end of the first episode, the TARDIS is seemingly destroyed. Stranded in a surreal land of fiction, the Doctor and Jamie and Zoe must navigate this bizarre realm and defeat the Master of the land. No, not that Master, in order to find their way back. However, one of the most noticeable instances of the TARDIS being absent for an extended period occurs during the Fourth Doctor's debut season, where it is missing entirely for two consecutive stories and largely absent from another two. This begins at the end of the arc in space, when the Doctor, Sarah and Harry travel down to Earth from the Nerva arc to repair the transmat system. Ordinarily, this would have been a simple task for the TARDIS, but instead, in the Centauran experiment, they find themselves confronting the Centauran Styer and preventing his race from invading Earth. Whilst this decision made narrative sense, it was also a practical one, as the story was filmed entirely on location at Dartmoor National Park, which lacked any kind of studio-based sequences, meaning transporting the TARDIS prop was unnecessary. The next story, Genesis of the Daleks, once again omits the TARDIS, as the Time Lords intercept the transmat beam and send the Doctor to Skaro on a special mission to prevent or hinder the creation of the Daleks. This decision serves multiple functions. It avoids the need for a convoluted explanation of how the Doctor, Sarah, and Harry might have rejoined the TARDIS, keeping the ongoing nervous story arc intact. More importantly, it heightens the dramatic tension of the story. By stranding the Doctor in a hostile environment with only Time Ring as his way back, it reinforces the high stakes of the mission. When that Time Ring is confiscated, the Doctor is left truly trapped, making the journey even more perilous. The trio finally reunite with the TARDIS at the conclusion of Revenge of the Cybermen, when they return to Nerva. But even as season 13 begins, the TARDIS remains largely absent. In Terror of the Zygons, we don't see it materialising in Scotland, and it only appears at the very end of the story. There is an irony to the Fourth Doctor's first season, given how little we see of the TARDIS. Even in Robot, his debut story, it merely stands in the background at unit headquarters, serving as little more than comic relief when the Doctor uses it as a wardrobe to pick out his new outfit. It isn't until the very end of the story, when the Doctor invites Harry on board, that it finally plays a more traditional role, kicking off the interconnected story arc that defines the rest of season 12. In fact, the first time the interior of the TARDIS is actually seen during the Fourth Doctor era is in Planet of Evil, his seventh story, and over 18 months since it was last shown in Death to the Daleks. In many ways, this feels like a lingering hangover from the Third Doctor era, where the TARDIS was often sidelined. Given that the Fourth Doctor is almost a complete antithesis of his predecessor, it's surprising that it took until his second season to fully embrace his more alien persona and regain the freedom to explore the universe once again. Over the years, the TARDIS interior has undergone multiple redesigns and has featured various rooms beyond the console. As previously discussed, the TARDIS itself can serve as a primary setting and as a tool for character development. Exploring its interior can enhance the story, as seen in Castrovalva, or become a narrative misstep. Yes, I'm looking at you, the Invasion of Time. However, a crowded TARDIS can sometimes present logistical challenges. The First Doctor's era frequently featured three companions, a dynamic that largely faded in the 1970s when the show focused on a more single companion, with occasional exceptions. The early Fifth Doctor era saw a return to the larger ensemble, with Adric, Nyssa and Tegan all joining the Doctor by the end of Tom Baker's final season. Whilst this was intended to help establish the new Doctor's character, it also introduced complications. With four main characters to accommodate, some stories struggled to balance their screen time effectively. This era of Doctor Who also embraced more character conflict, sometimes serving as a crucial narrative element, but other times feeling like unnecessary padding to meet episode quotas. Ultimately, the TARDIS interior is a studio set, and the BBC never maintained a permanent setup for it. The set was repeatedly assembled, dismantled, and stored between seasons, leading to inevitable wear and tear. A notable example occurred with the secondary console room introduced in season 14, which warped while in storage and became unusable. However, at the time, Doctor Who was a rated success, making it easier to secure BBC approval for the funding of a refreshed console room design. By the late 1980s, however, the show's decline in popularity and impending cancellation meant funding was scarce. During the Seventh Doctor's era, the TARDIS console room fell into a state of disrepair, and with the BBC reluctant to invest in an overhaul, its on-screen presence was minimised. This limitation, though, inadvertently benefited the era's storytelling approach. With each of McCoy's three seasons limited to just 14 episodes, split into two three-part stories and two four-part stories, there was little room for unnecessary scenes. Script editor Andrew Cartmel, who disliked the TARDIS interior scenes being used for superfluous dialogue or soap opera-style interactions, leaned into this restriction. As a result, the TARDIS rarely appeared, and even its materialization was sometimes omitted. For example, in Remembrance of the Daleks, the TARDIS simply lingers in the background, fittingly blending into its 1960s setting, and the last time the TARDIS interior appeared in the classic series was in the season 26 opener Battlefield. By that point, the set was in such poor condition that the Doctor's use of his dim mood lighting effectively concealed the fact that its walls had been replaced. Since Doctor Who relaunched in 2005, the TARDIS, particularly its interior, has played a more prominent role than ever before. This could be attributed to the vastly expanded console room, which is now larger and more intricate in design than the classic era. From a production standpoint, it makes sense to integrate it more fully into the narrative, making it more of an expensive, permanent set. Yet, even in the modern era, there are notable instances where the TARDIS is barely featured or entirely absent. One key reason for this is the production approach to the Doctor Light episodes, stories where the Doctor has minimal screen time, which in turn reduces the need for the TARDIS to appear. This scheduling technique allowed for 2 episodes to be filmed simultaneously, maximising production efficiency. A prime example is Turn Left, which focuses on Donna navigating an alternative reality where the Doctor died, meaning he and the TARDIS are completely absent for the most of the story. In similar fashion, Midnight, though Doctor-focused, deliberately confined him to a claustrophobic, inescapable setting. Had the TARDIS been accessible, it would have provided an easy escape, undermining the episode's tension. Instead, the Doctor is truly trapped, reinforcing the vulnerability of the character when stripped of his usual means of control. This narrative device extends beyond production-driven choices. The modern series often omits the TARDIS to heighten the Doctor's isolation, reinforcing the theme of being alone in a dangerous universe. Heaven Sent takes this to an extreme, making the Doctor the sole character for nearly the entire runtime. Deprived of his ship, his allies, and even an obvious adversary, he is left to rely solely on his intellect and endurance to escape. A different variation on this theme occurs in the 13th Doctor's debut, The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Immediately after regenerating, the Doctor is thrown into a new world without her TARDIS, which has seemingly rejected her. This absence extends into the Ghost Monument, where the Doctor and her new companions are stranded and must navigate a hostile alien world before they can be reunited with the ship. This echoes the 4th Doctor's debut season, where the stories were structured around a clear objective, keeping the Doctor on a mission rather than allowing the TARDIS to be a convenient escape. While the modern era often leans into the TARDIS as a central feature, its absence remains a powerful storytelling tool. Whether for practical production reasons or deliberate narrative choices, it takes away the Doctor from their ship and forces them to rely on their wits, emphasizing the vulnerability and resourcefulness in a way that continues a tradition dating back to the classic era. As mentioned at the start of this video, the TARDIS is a fundamental component of Doctor Who, not just as a means of travel, but as an entity with unique properties. Throughout the years, the Doctor has travelled with many companions, but the one constant presence he has always been the TARDIS. It was the TARDIS that allowed the Doctor to escape Gallifrey, setting the foundation for their endless adventures throughout time and space. In many ways, you could argue that the TARDIS is the Doctor's closest and most enduring companion. The show has long hinted that the TARDIS is more than just a machine. It is sentient, alive in its own way, subtly guiding the Doctor rather than simply being piloted. This idea was fully realised in The Doctor's Wife, where the TARDIS was given a physical human form, emphasising the deep, almost symbiotic connection between them. While the TARDIS is integral to the show's narrative, its absence, when used effectively, serves to highlight the Doctor's vulnerability. Stripping the Doctor of the TARDIS leaves him without his usual safety net, reinforcing how much he relies on it to sustain a nomadic lifestyle. Stories that remove the TARDIS, even temporarily, force the Doctor to operate under entirely different circumstances, creating new challenges and dynamics. Historically, when the TARDIS was removed from the show for an extended period, most notably in the early Third Doctor era, the production team soon realised that its prolonged absence limited the show's storytelling potential. The TARDIS is more than just a vessel. It is the ultimate plot device, unlocking the boundless storytelling possibilities that define Doctor Who. Without it, the show would have been far more restricted in scope, unable to explore the full breadth of its time-travelling premise. Even today, the TARDIS remains the single most important element that makes Doctor Who what it is. It's not just the Doctor's ship, it is a home, a partner, and in many ways, the heart of the show itself. But tell me, what do you think? How important is the TARDIS? Is it the Doctor's safe space? And what do you think of the stories when it was absent altogether? Let me know in the comments. But for now, it's the end. The moment has been prepared for.